Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled Never Mess with a Farmer. This story will show you that messing with a farmer and his land is a bad idea, especially if the farmer has too much time on his hands and does not like to let people get away with things. Now, as you can probably tell by now, the farmer in this story is me, and my family has owned my land for a few generations. About 20 years back though, we ended up splitting the land in half and selling the other part of the land for much needed money at the time. Since then, a few different people have lived there, the most recent being my neighbor. I don't know much about him other than the fact that he is from the city and a complete jerk. I am willing to give anyone a chance, hell sometimes I will even give them a second one. This guy though just didn't seem to know when to stop and leave well enough alone. This guy loved to brag about his money and that to him the piece of land was cheap, which of course ticked me off internally. When you work hard and have somebody come and talk about how they have all this easy money just to clearly show off, it can be annoying. So right away, personality-wise, this guy was not connecting well with me, who was raised as a farm boy. Then things started to escalate when I was getting the cops called on me by none other than Mr. Neighbor. I was confused the first time the cops rang my doorbell and I thought something terrible happened. Officer: Mr. OP? Me: yes, did something happen? Officer: we got a noise complaint about some farm equipment running this morning. They claim that there is some written contract that you won't do it in the morning. Even the officer seemed really confused because this was farm country and a ton of machines were being used early in the morning. Me: I don't know what you're talking about. I never signed anything about not using my things. Morning is when I get the majority of the farm work done, like everyone else. They were nice and left me alone to continue with my day. I think if they are called, they have to come out even though they knew it was a waste of their time. I wish I could say that that was the only time they were called on me, but it wasn't. They came again and again, ranging from noise complaints to allegations that I had planted drugs, which I hadn't, and they figured that out quickly, even a call that I was making my cows moo. That one I didn't even know what it meant, and neither did the officer that showed up to my farm. Since he is the only other person in this story, it wouldn't take you long to realize that the neighbor was the one doing this. If that was not bad enough, he was doing it on my end as well. I guess since the police obviously couldn't do anything to help him stop me from breaking rules that don't exist, he was going to try and bully me. Neighbor: you know that lawnmowers before 8 AM are not allowed in this state. Me: actually they are. Mornings are times for farm chores in this area. Neighbor: well, you know, in XYZ city, people were not allowed to make noise like that so early in the morning. And on Sundays, it was not allowed at all because it's supposed to be holy. Me: I don't really know what you expect me to do. Start my day late and let my animals go hungry because you don't like the noises of the city within the city? That seemed to shut him up, but only for a couple of days. He also had a bad habit of walking onto my property since there was no actual divide between the two. I constantly had to tell him to please get back onto his property, only to be told that there was no fence, so there was nothing I could do about him being there. It wouldn't have been too bad except for the fact that whenever he was on my property, things would get messed up. That was when I decided that I had enough of this guy and I was going to get my revenge. He had unknowingly given me the idea of how I was going to get back at him and keep him off my property. Now, just a note that on my property I have both animals and crops. It is just on a bit of a smaller scale than one would think compared to one of those giant farms. Still, it was enough that what I was planning was allowed to happen. I decided that if he wanted a fence built, then I was going to build one. This guy did not wake up until almost noon, so I had plenty of time to make an entire fence out of poop the entire 200 feet of our property. To be specific, it was cow manure which I used as fertilizer. When he woke up and saw it, he was fuming and came over to me using the front entrance for once. Neighbor, what the hell is that? I decided to try and play dumb. Me, what are you talking about? Neighbor, the giant wall of smelly cow manure. What the hell did you do to my property? Me, don't worry, I checked the property line and the entire wall is on my side. Neighbor, get rid of it right now. There is no way that biohazard out there is legal. Me, actually our state allows me to keep an outdoor supply of manure as long as I am using it as fertilizer, which I am. Neighbor, the smell is seeping into my yard and I have to keep the windows shut to not smell it. You need to get rid of it right now. Me, it's a country thing. You will get used to the farm life soon enough instead of that horrible city with those crappy rules you keep telling me about. He realizes that talking to the growing sarcastic me was not going to work and instead he tried to sue me to get rid of the poop pile. He had no case though, and it was found that since it was my property, I was allowed to keep what they deemed a manure pile. I would have called it a fence, but either way, the property line now had a clear marker on it and was more than enough on my side. I will admit the smell was not that great, but I had a much higher tolerance than the neighbor did. The neighbor ended up moving about 2 weeks later because he couldn't handle the smell and country life any longer. I'm assuming he went back to the city where most of the rich snobs like him tended to live. Nobody has moved into the new property yet, but I am slowly making my way through the manure fence. It makes for a great fertilizer and it is actually super convenient for me. It just goes to show that if you want to start up with a farmer about his chores and his land, then you are going to be in for a huge dose of revenge. And yeah, Ripe Stars, certainly that is one thing we as Reddit veterans have learned over time. You simply never mess with a farmer. When it comes to revenge, they for some reason always have some of the best ideas, and they really love to mess with entitled people from the city. Either way, if you enjoy stories about crazy neighbors and entitled people in general, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support my channel. Thank you so much in advance, your help is very much appreciated, and I just cannot thank you enough for your amazing daily support. The next one is titled Supervisor Dug His Own Grave. This happened about 10 years ago. It is very long, so I apologize for that. The supervisor position for my department was known to have a lot of turnover, so I had a lot of bosses. But the one I'm going to tell you about takes the prize as the biggest asshat, and I will tell you how I got revenge. So the new boss starts working at my agency, and we are created by the state legislature but funded by the users we regulate. As a governmental agency, it is extremely difficult to fire someone. It has to be a blatant act, easily verifiable, and in violation of published policies. You get the idea. Here is my story. I had been employed with the agency for 13 years, had a solid work ethic and provable productivity. My position is a professional one and I have 2 degrees in the field. I loved my job, and about 8 months before Bad Boss, Terry, his real name and I don't care, was hired as a tech worker, and Emily, also real name and again I don't care, had been promoted. Emily was known to spend her workday texting her SO or BFF or on the phone making appointments or scheduling vacations and brown-nosing whomever was her direct report. By the way, that speaks to how she got the promotion. I tried to train her up, but she was always too busy or out sick. Enter newly hired Terry. He was cognizant of my skills and work and was generally genial for the first couple of months. Suddenly, Emily was getting the choice assignments. When I asked Terry about it, he responded that she had experience. I countered that no, she didn't, because she didn't have time to be trained in that area. I warned him that her lack of experience was going to cause him heartburn. And within a month, it did. He had to fix her work and would spend hours in his office trying to train her up in the area. Now let me say that Emily was attractive. Tall, blonde, curves in the right proportions and in the right places. I am short, redhead, tomboy with the curves corresponding with that description. However, I had been the sole employee in the department for 11 years and had built a solid reputation in the field. Terry begins to walk into my shared office when Emily was out to tell me that the agency no longer needs my expertise and I should go find another job. He tells me this daily for weeks. I finally go to his boss, who had been my boss prior to Terry, and ask if the agency would like me to leave. He vehemently tells me the agency needs my expertise and asks why I have asked that. I tell him what Terry has been telling me, and a discussion happens between the two, and I am told that Terry denies telling me that. Now I see how it is. Terry nearly gets me written up twice, both times lying to HR. Emily gets a promotion to supervisor, for which she was wildly unqualified, and she crashed and burned within 9 months, which is another story, and I get the crappiest review I'd ever had. I knew I had to bide my time, keep the cleanest nose ever, but I knew how to take him down. March comes around and I had put in for vacation for a week that month. I had put in for the time off 2 months earlier, and the Friday before my vacation begins, I am called into Terry's office. "You need to be reachable on your cell phone the entire week," he says. Well, that's going to be difficult. My parents live in another state in a rural area and the cell service tower is for another provider. I only get service when I go into town, I informed him. "I want the phone number to your parents' house. Give it to me." No, that's an intrusion to their privacy. There is nothing I'm responsible for that cannot wait a week, I told him. "Give it to me or I will have you written up." Okay, I will give you the number. In the back of my mind I am thinking that he has written his own death warrant. You see, at our agency, whenever you make a long distance call, you have to enter a code that is unique to you for the call to go through. On Wednesday of my vacation, my mom answers the phone and tells me that it is for me. Terry is on the phone demanding the password for my computer. I decline to give it to him. He insists I give it to him. While he is on the line yelling at me, I log into my personal email and start composing an email to the head of admin and HR director detailing his phone call. I eventually hung up on Terry and sent my email. Monday morning at 9 AM, I am called into the HR office. "What is this email you sent? What happened?" I detailed the call and what Terry wanted, which is against agency policy, and how I handled it. "Can you prove it?" Well, he had the call on speaker and Emily was in his office to witness it. Oh, and by the way, here's my mom's phone number. I'm sure you can figure out if it's been called, when and by whom. Terry is an absolute a-hole to me all day, and whenever Emily left the office, so did I. I was done with this guy, absolutely done. The next day Emily is called into HR, and an hour later Terry is called. Emily hadn't returned, and 2 hours later they both return. Emily begins to ask me about certain areas she hasn't gotten into yet, and I kind of blow her off. She is an accessory in my mind. Terry refuses to speak to me at all, and I found out later that he was told to stop harassing me, and the next time I complained, he would be fired. 6 months later, Terry quits. 6 months after that, they demote Emily back to a position equal to mine, but out of my department. I retire in 8 months with a sweet pension and retirement benefits. F you both, Terry and Emily, no one screws with me and gets away with it. The next one is titled, "A guy was a condescending POS to a bartender, aka me." I had a guy come in and complain that our gin was not refrigerated. He, let's call him Mr. Butt Tongue, and his friend took a seat at the bar in front of me. We had a chat about drinks, everything fairly casual, except you could sense that Mr. Butt Tongue was a bit full of himself. It was a fairly fancy place. He insisted that he could taste whether a cocktail or a gin tonic was made on chilled gin before mixed with ice and mixers. I told him that it wouldn't make much sense to assume that because it mixes with ice and the rest, so the temperature of the gin wouldn't have any noticeable effect. Now I understand that technically, since room temperature gin is warmer than ice, it can have a faster diluting effect on the ice, but mixers are most often chilled and the quantities of the gin versus the mixers make the heat conversion absolutely minuscule. Mr. Butt Tongue gets stubborn. Now usually I really wouldn't give this much energy to semi-annoying guests, it happens a lot, but this particular guy, just hit a nerve. The more I presented facts and examples, all with a professional smile, the more he became condescending and even called me an idiot directly. All the while his friend is next to him and clearly a bit uncomfortable with Mr. Butt Tongue's behavior. The friend tries to lighten the mood and looks very apologetic at me. I give an assuring look that it was alright because I felt a plan mixing up. I accept all the condescending BS and we happen to have the particular somewhat expensive gin he referred to through the ordeal as a staple of quality and taste. He had told me countless times how that one is the only one he has at home and that nothing else would do. I grabbed the bottle and fiddle with it to create a little tension of the unknown outcomes. Cue the setup. I propose a challenge. I will chill one dose of gin without diluting it and make 2 otherwise identical gin and tonics for you. If you can taste the difference, you get both for free and another one for your friend. However, if you cannot taste the difference, you pay for all 3 and throw in another one for me, so 4 in total. Almost offended by the challenge and yet close to rupturing of arrogance for the chance to prove me wrong, Mr. Butt Tongue accepts and even smacked his hand on the bar and everything. I grab my trusty old stirring glass, name is self-explanatory, but for those who need clarification, this is a large glass meant specifically for stirring cocktails until properly diluted and chilled, from which you then pour the cocktail over into the appropriate glass. I grab 2 small yet thin plastic cups, add ice cubes, crushed ice and a little water to the stirring glass, 1 plastic cup in, gin in hand, I turn to Mr. Butt Tongue to establish acceptance of the setup. The guy accepts and his friend very intrigued and could see that I was stirring trouble up. Now you might be wondering what the hell kind of bar this was, since I had so much time to screw around. It was early evening, not busy at all, and we had several bar stations in the bar, so other guests could be served. Also, our boss wanted us to talk to people and make sure they have a good and personal experience of the place. But now back to the story. I pour a double portion of gin in the plastic cup that went into the stirring glass and an equal portion in the plastic cup next to the stirring glass. I start stirring and I stir for a solid 3 minutes, counting on needing extra time to chill the cup and gin through the cup without getting diluted. The dude looking more and more confident the colder the cup looks. I take out the cup, dry off the water from the outside so the 2 cups are indistinguishable. Mr. Butt Tongue nods acceptingly. I set up 2 glasses on the bar, ready to make 2 gin tonics. The bar is quite tall, so I grab the 2 plastic cups and lower them outside of his line of sight and shuffle them between my hands to make it clear that he doesn't know which one is which and he accepts the premise. Add 1 doublecross.exe. Under the edge of the bar and out of sight, I grab another plastic cup and pour the same portion of gin in it. I proceed to create the gin tonics, ice in, gin from each cup into respective glass, tonic, 1 slice of lemon, stalk of rosemary, et voila, Mr. Butt Tongue is served. Of course the chilled cup with gin is chilling under the bar still. He sips one, nothing, sips the other, nothing, but confused. He sips the first again, and then the second one again, however this time he makes a grimace as if the second time around the gin tonic tasted awful. He sips the first one again and proclaims how that one is undoubtedly the chilled one. Friend, as you, dear reader, knows what's up, or at least has enough of a suspicion that he is already laughing through his teeth. Mr. Butt Tongue already gloating, I use his confidence to act disappointed and make it look like he had won. The friend suddenly not laughing so much, both are hooked, my plan had peaked, time to land this thing. Mr. Butt Tongue starts mocking and proceeds to ask for another gin tonic for his friend. So I make it and casually bring up the 3rd and chilled cup and fill the 3rd gin tonic glass with it. Friend instantly understands and almost pisses himself laughing. Mr. Butt Tongue, at first confused, looks at the 3 plastic cups on the bar top, one slightly different with some condensation on the outside, and then it lands. He realizes that the 2 he had tasted were absolutely identical and none of them were chilled. The look that man gave me, he was humiliated by his own hand in front of his friend, and on top of that from some bartender half his age. I swear the temperature in the room went up by at least 10 degrees. Mr. Butt Tongue only ever said 2 words to me and I never saw him again. Check please. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support and I hope to see you again tomorrow.